You are jogging through the peaceful streets of your own neighborhood, lost in thought, when flashing red and blue lights suddenly wash across the pavement. For Brigadier General Simone Whitaker, a highly decorated military veteran, this was not a hostile combat zone overseas. It was a quiet, beautifully maintained suburb in Maryland. What began as an illegal, racially motivated stop by two arrogant police officers quickly became the most catastrophic mistake of their careers. They placed handcuffs on a woman with top-secret security clearance. Then she made a single phone call. The crisp autumn air carried the scent of fallen oak leaves and rain-soaked pavement. Crestwood Hills, one of Maryland's most affluent residential communities, remained completely still beneath the darkness before sunrise. Perfectly trimmed lawns stretched to the curb. Security systems operated silently behind polished mahogany doors. It was the kind of neighborhood where families paid millions of dollars for privacy, peace, and the comforting illusion that nothing dangerous could ever reach them. For Brigadier General Simone Whitaker, the neighborhood had become a sanctuary. After 28 years in the United States Army, 3 punishing combat deployments, an assignment at the Pentagon, and a demanding advisory position with the Joint Chiefs of Staff, she valued silence more than most people ever could. At 52, Simone remained in exceptional physical condition. Her mind was as sharp as a freshly honed blade, and her daily 6-mile run was the only part of her routine when she allowed herself to disconnect from the enormous burden of national security. That morning, she wore a faded, oversized gray West Point sweatshirt, black running tights, and a fleece beanie pulled low over her ears against the autumn cold. Without the stars on her shoulders, the perfectly pressed uniform, or the commanding presence she carried through the secure briefing rooms of Washington, she looked like any other woman trying to exercise before the neighborhood awakened. But to the 2 men sitting inside Police Cruiser 44, she did not look like an American hero. She looked like a suspect. Officer Grant Mercer had served on the police force for 14 years. He was cynical, bitter, and hardened by a career in which he had allowed the darkest parts of the job to slowly strip away his humanity. His partner, Officer Elliot Crane, was a rookie who had graduated from the academy only months earlier. Eager to prove himself and afraid of making mistakes, he depended almost entirely on Mercer's judgment. As they drove slowly along Hawthorne Crest, their headlights cut through the thin morning mist and caught Simone's silhouette moving steadily along the sidewalk. "Slow down," Mercer muttered. His eyes narrowed as he tightened his grip on the steering wheel. He tapped the brakes until the cruiser moved at the same pace as Simone's stride. Crane looked up from the onboard computer. "What is it?" "We got a call." "A call about what?" "There wasn't a call," Mercer replied, his voice filled with confidence he had not earned. "I'm looking at that runner." "Do you recognize her?" Crane leaned toward the windshield and squinted through the darkness. "No, she just looks like someone out for a morning jog." "In this neighborhood?" Mercer scoffed. A cold, judgmental sneer appeared on his face. "Before sunrise, wearing a baggy sweatshirt and a beanie that covers half her face? She doesn't exactly fit the profile of a Crestwood Hills homeowner." "Mercer, there's nothing unusual about someone jogging. We've had package thieves in the nearby subdivision recently. Someone casing houses would dress exactly like that." "She's literally running," Crane said weakly, trying to introduce some reason into the conversation. "Package thieves usually have a vehicle." "You let me handle the policing, rookie." Mercer pressed the accelerator and abruptly steered the cruiser toward the curb, blocking the sidewalk directly in Simone's path. Simone's heart rate was steady as she ran. She had been mentally organizing a logistics report concerning troop movements in Eastern Europe when the cruiser's spotlight suddenly struck her directly in the face. She instinctively raised one hand to shield her eyes as her running shoes slid to a stop against the concrete. The cruiser's tires scraped the curb. Before the vehicle had completely stopped, Mercer threw open the driver's door and stepped into the cold air. One hand rested casually, yet threateningly, on his duty belt. "Stay right there," he shouted. His voice echoed through the silent street. Simone remained perfectly still. Decades of military training immediately took control. Her breathing slowed and her posture straightened as she evaluated the situation with the cold precision of a battlefield commander. 2 officers. One experienced officer displaying an aggressive posture. One nervous rookie remaining several steps behind. The spotlight was being used as a psychological weapon intended to confuse and intimidate her. "Good morning, officers," Simone said. Her voice was deep, composed, and completely free of fear. "Is there a problem?" I'm the one asking the questions, Mercer replied, taking 2 heavy steps toward her. Where are you coming from? My home, Simone answered, gesturing over her shoulder. It's about 2 miles in that direction. I'm completing a running loop. Your home, Mercer repeated. His voice carried open disbelief. He looked slowly over her faded sweatshirt, black tights, and dark skin. You live here? In Crestwood Hills? I do. My address is 718 Hawthorne Crest. That property is worth around $3 million, Mercer said, stepping even closer and deliberately invading her personal space. You expect me to believe you own that house? Simone's jaw tightened. She understood exactly what was happening. She had watched similar encounters on the news. She had advised young soldiers about how to survive them. She had experienced less severe versions when she was younger. But standing there at the height of her career, only a few blocks from the home she had earned through decades of sacrifice, service, blood, and discipline, she felt a cold fury begin to harden inside her chest. I am not going to justify my financial status to you, officer, Simone said firmly. I am exercising, and I have broken no law. Unless I am being detained, I am going to continue my run. She stepped toward the side of the cruiser. Hey, Mercer shouted, his face turning red. I didn't say you could leave. Stop right there or I'll put you in handcuffs. The threat shattered the stillness of the neighborhood. Crane finally stepped out of the passenger side. He looked nervously from his partner to the woman standing on the sidewalk. Grant, maybe we should just... Stay quiet, Crane, Mercer snapped. He returned his full attention to Simone. I need to see identification right now. Simone took a slow breath and maintained direct eye contact. I do not have identification with me. As you can clearly see, I am wearing running clothes. My house key is tied to my shoelace, and my phone is secured in this armband. That is everything I am carrying. No identification, Mercer said with a triumphant smirk. Of course. You're wandering through a wealthy neighborhood before sunrise, claiming you live in a mansion, and you don't have any proof. Put your hands on the hood of the cruiser. Simone did not move. The arrogance of his command vibrated through her bones. Inside the Pentagon, high-ranking generals waited for her permission before speaking in certain rooms. Yet here, an officer driven by prejudice and ego was treating her like a criminal on a street corner. Officer, Simone said. Her voice dropped lower, carrying the unmistakable authority of command. I am going to explain this once. You do not have reasonable, articulable suspicion to detain me. You also have no legal basis to demand identification when no lawful arrest has been made. I have voluntarily provided my name and address. I am returning home. For a brief moment, Mercer hesitated. Her calm, legally precise response unsettled him. Most people he confronted became frightened. They panicked, stammered, argued, or immediately became defensive. This woman spoke as though she belonged behind a judge's bench. But Mercer's ego quickly overwhelmed his judgment. He could not allow her to challenge him in front of the rookie. In his mind, letting her walk away would weaken his authority. Are you refusing a lawful order? He growled, closing the distance between them. It is not a lawful order, Simone replied without moving. Mercer lunged forward and seized her left forearm with a crushing grip. The physical contact triggered years of combat conditioning. In a fraction of a second, Simone's instincts calculated exactly how much leverage she would need to throw Mercer over her hip, hyperextend his elbow, and drive him into the pavement before Crane could even reach his weapon. But the strategic part of her mind, the general rather than the soldier, overruled the instinct. If she defended herself physically, Mercer would use it to justify everything he had done. She could become another statistic. Another tragic headline twisted to protect the person who had initiated the violence. She would let them dig their own grave. She would not fight this battle with her fists. She would use the full and devastating force of the institution she served. Simone deliberately relaxed her muscles and offered no resistance as Mercer twisted her arm behind her back. Take it easy, Crane called out, stepping forward with both hands raised. Grant, there's no reason to hurt her. She's resisting, Mercer shouted. It was a complete fabrication intended to justify his use of force. He drove Simone against the cold metal hood of the cruiser. The impact pressed her cheek painfully against the surface. I am completely compliant, Simone said loudly enough for Crane to hear every word. I am not resisting. You are using excessive force. The handcuffs closed around her wrists with 2 sharp clicks. Mercer tightened them far beyond what was necessary. The metal bit into her skin and compressed a nerve, sending pain along her forearms. Simone did not flinch. She stared at the reflection of the flashing lights in the cruiser's windshield. "You have the right to remain silent," Mercer sneered, practically spitting the words into her ear as he searched her with unnecessary force. He tore the phone from her armband and threw it onto the hood. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." A front door across the street opened. Malcolm Reeves, a retired attorney who lived near Simone, had stepped outside to collect his newspaper. "Why is there?" He stopped on the porch, his mouth falling open as he watched the officers restraining her. "Hey!" Malcolm shouted, clutching the front of his robe. "What in the world are you doing to her?" Mercer glared across the street. "Police business, sir. Return to your house." "She's my neighbor," Malcolm called back, stepping onto the lawn. "That's Simone. She lives right there." Mercer ignored him. He seized Simone by the upper arm and pulled her away from the hood. "Get in the car," he ordered as he opened the rear door. "You are making a catastrophic mistake, Officer Mercer," Simone said quietly after reading the nameplate on his uniform. "Save it for the judge," Mercer laughed. He slammed the heavy door behind her. Simone sat upright in the cramped plastic rear seat. Her wrists throbbed beneath the handcuffs. The odor of stale sweat, vomit, and cheap vinyl filled the compartment. Through the wire partition, she watched Mercer swagger toward the driver's seat, while Crane climbed into the passenger side, looking pale and deeply conflicted. The engine started, and the cruiser pulled away from the curb. Brigadier General Simone Whitaker was officially under arrest. The drive to the Briarwood Division precinct felt agonizingly long. Simone refused to lean back. She sat perfectly straight, unwilling to give the officers the satisfaction of seeing her discomfort. Each bump in the road drove the handcuffs deeper into her skin, sending sharp pain through her arms. In the front seat, the partnership between the two officers was beginning to fracture. "Grant, did you hear the man on the porch?" Crane asked, his voice strained with anxiety. "He said she was his neighbor. He knew her name." "People lie," Mercer replied dismissively. He adjusted the rearview mirror so he could glare at Simone. "Criminals cover for one another. Do you really believe a woman like that owns a mansion on Hawthorne Crest? We have her for failure to identify, resisting arrest, and suspicious activity. It's an easy case." "What happens if she really lives there?" Crane asked. He twisted the cord of his radio between his fingers. "We didn't verify her name. We didn't do anything according to procedure." "Procedure is a guideline, rookie," Mercer snapped. "On the street, you trust your instincts. My instincts tell me she's trouble." Simone remained silent. Never interrupt an enemy while he is making a mistake. It was a principle she had taught at the Army War College. Mercer was reckless, arrogant, and blinded by his own prejudice. With every sentence, he was creating evidence against himself. He was practically preparing his own termination papers. Simone intended to let him sign them. The cruiser eventually entered the fortified parking lot of the precinct as the sky began to brighten in muted shades of gray and violet. Mercer parked, walked to the back of the vehicle, and pulled the door open. "Out!" Simone stepped from the cruiser, her legs stiff from the confined ride. Mercer seized her arm and marched her through the heavy glass doors as though displaying a trophy. Even before sunrise, the Briarwood precinct was a noisy, disorganized center of ringing phones, unfinished reports, and exhausted officers. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead with a harsh, relentless sound. Desk Sergeant Wade Hollis sat behind the front counter holding a foam cup of black coffee. He was balding, tired, and carried the worn expression of a man who had seen nearly everything during a long career. "Look what the night dragged in," Hollis muttered as Mercer pushed Simone toward the booking desk. "What have you got?" "Suspicious prowler, resisting arrest, and refusing to identify herself," Mercer replied proudly. He slammed Simone's phone onto the counter. "Caught her casing houses in Crestwood Hills." Hollis sighed and pulled a booking form toward him. He looked up at Simone and immediately noticed her calm expression, upright posture, and complete absence of fear. It was unusual. Most people brought into the precinct were crying, shouting, trembling, or demanding a lawyer. This woman appeared to be silently evaluating the building's structural weaknesses. "All right," Hollis said, picking up a pen. "Let's make this simple. What is your name?" "Simone Whitaker." He wrote it down. Date of birth. She provided the information. "Address? 718 Hawthorne Crest, Crestwood Hills, Maryland." Her voice carried clearly across the room. Several officers looked up when they heard the name of the exclusive neighborhood. Mercer laughed harshly. "Put down transient, Sergeant. She's delusional." I am stating my legal residence for the official record, Simone said. She fixed Hollis with a steady look that made him shift uncomfortably in his chair. I strongly suggest that you record it accurately. Hollis cleared his throat. He could not explain why, but the woman standing in handcuffs made him feel as though he were the one being questioned. He wrote down the address exactly as she had given it. We need your shoelaces, your beanie, and anything else you're carrying, he said. Crane stepped forward and awkwardly removed the laces from her running shoes. He placed the house key in a clear evidence bag. Mercer pulled the black beanie from her head, revealing her closely cropped, natural hair. Take her to holding cell 3, Hollis instructed. We'll process her fingerprints and determine who she really is. Mercer seized her arm again and led her along a narrow cinder-block corridor that smelled of cleaning chemicals and despair. He unlocked a heavy steel door and shoved her inside. Make yourself comfortable, Simone, he said, using the name he had heard her neighbor shout. You're going to be here for a while. I need my phone, Simone replied calmly, standing in the middle of the cell. I am legally entitled to make a phone call. Mercer leaned against the bars with a cruel smile. You'll get a call eventually, maybe after we finish processing you, maybe several hours from now. It depends on how cooperative you decide to be. Officer Mercer, Simone said, walking toward the bars. She did not shout or raise her voice. The chilling authority in her tone caused his smile to disappear for a fraction of a second. You are violating standard operating procedures, my constitutional rights, and multiple departmental regulations. I strongly advise you to give me my phone immediately. Mercer concealed his brief uncertainty with louder aggression. Is that a threat? Are you threatening a police officer? It is a tactical assessment, Simone answered coldly. You have detained a United States citizen without legal cause. Give me my phone. Sit down and shut up. Mercer struck the bars with his baton, producing a deafening metallic crash. He turned and stormed down the corridor. Simone remained standing until the sound of his footsteps disappeared. Then she slowly sat on the concrete bench attached to the wall. She was no longer angry. Anger was uncontrolled, and Brigadier General Simone Whitaker did not surrender control. She became focused. She began calculating. She reviewed every face she had seen, memorizing badge numbers, statements, actions, and the order in which everything had happened. Dark purple rings were already forming around her wrists where the handcuffs had cut into her skin. She thought about her grandfather, who had marched for civil rights in Selma. She thought about the soldiers she had sent into dangerous places to defend the freedoms that had just been casually taken from her. The officers believed they had arrested a nobody, a nameless black woman they could intimidate to satisfy their own pride. They had no idea they had imprisoned the Deputy Director of Strategic Logistics for the United States military. Simone rested her head against the cold wall and waited. She was a master of logistics. Soon, she would begin coordinating the complete institutional destruction of Grant Mercer's career. All she needed was one telephone call. The Briarwood Division Precinct usually operated according to a predictable cycle of traffic offenses, minor crimes, local disputes, and occasional burglaries. Sergeant Hollis recognized most repeat offenders and had developed a reliable ability to evaluate newly arrested suspects. The woman sitting silently in holding cell 3 was different. Something about her unsettled his instincts. He took the fingerprints Crane had awkwardly collected and submitted them to the automated fingerprint identification system, linking the search with the FBI's national database. Sergeant, Mercer called from the doorway of the break room. He held a fresh cup of coffee and looked extremely satisfied with himself. She causing any trouble? The neighborhood prowlers usually start crying for attorneys by now. She hasn't said anything, Hollis muttered, watching the progress indicator on his monitor. That's why I marked the fingerprint search as a priority. Something about her doesn't feel right. She didn't even flinch when you forced her onto the cruiser. She's probably a hardened criminal, Mercer said with a laugh. She's likely been arrested before. You'll find outstanding warrants from Baltimore or Washington. The search finished. The monitor flickered. Instead of displaying a normal criminal record or reporting that no match had been found, the screen turned completely black. A bright crimson banner appeared across the display. 3 rapid electronic warning tones sounded through the booking area. Hollis had never heard that alert during his entire career. Critical alert. Restricted file. Clearance level. Top secret/SCI. Sensitive compartmented information. United States Department of Defense. Subject Whitaker Simone R. Status: active duty flag officer. Directive: immediate release prohibited without Department of Defense verification. Contact the National Military Command Center immediately. Hollis stopped breathing. His hand tightened around his coffee cup until the foam collapsed. Hot liquid spilled across his fingers, but he did not react. He stared at the words, flag officer. Mercer, he whispered. What? Mercer asked, approaching the desk. Does she have warrants? You unbelievable idiot, Hollis breathed. The color drained from his face as he pointed at the monitor with a trembling hand. Look at the screen. Mercer leaned over the counter and narrowed his eyes. Top secret. Department of Defense? The system must be malfunctioning. It probably opened the wrong federal file. The system does not confuse fingerprints, Hollis said. Then his fear exploded into anger. Do you know what a flag officer is? It means she is an admiral or a general. You arrested a general of the United States Army. Crane, who had been completing paperwork nearby, dropped his pen. It struck the linoleum floor with a sharp sound. A general, he stammered. I warned you, Grant. I told you we should verify her identity. Shut up, Mercer snapped. A cold layer of sweat appeared across his forehead. It's a mistake. It has to be identity theft. People use false identities all the time. There is no way a black woman jogging through the neighborhood in a sweatshirt is a Pentagon general. Hollis ignored him. He yanked open a desk drawer, grabbed the evidence bag containing Simone's belongings, and tore it open. The phone inside was a government-issued encrypted device. I am taking her this phone, Hollis said in a deadly serious voice. You are going to stand here and pray to whatever God you believe in that she is capable of forgiveness. Hollis hurried through the cinder block corridor. When he reached holding cell 3, Simone was sitting exactly where Mercer had left her. Her back was straight, and her eyes were fixed on the heavy door. Ma'am, Hollis stammered as he opened the slot in the bars and passed the phone through. Your phone call? Simone rose calmly, walked forward, and took the device. Thank you, Sergeant Hollis. Am I correct in assuming that my fingerprints have cleared your system? Hollis swallowed. Yes, General Whitaker, I apologize for the delay. The delay is the least of this precinct's problems, Simone replied evenly. She turned away from him, entered a secure number, and waited for the call to connect. National Military Command Center, Major Tessa Rowe speaking. Major, this is Brigadier General Simone Whitaker. Authentication code Echo Victor 79er Bravo. Authentication confirmed, General Whitaker. The Major replied immediately, her voice shifting into formal deference. Go ahead, ma'am. Connect me with Lieutenant General Conrad Bell. Priority override. Yes, General. A click sounded, followed by a brief burst of static. Then a deep voice came through the phone. Simone, you are normally preparing for your debrief by now. What is the situation? Conrad, we have a minor tactical disruption, Simone said without emotion. I am currently locked inside holding cell 3 at the Briarwood Division Police Precinct in Maryland. Silence filled the line. Excuse me? Lieutenant General Bell finally said, his voice becoming dangerously quiet. Did you say you are inside a holding cell? I was stopped near my residence by 2 patrol officers, handcuffed, forced into a vehicle, and transported here. The stated accusations are failure to identify, resisting arrest, and suspicious activity. Were you injured? My wrists are bruised, nothing operationally compromising. However, my patience has been severely depleted. I am locating the precinct now, Bell growled. Rapid typing could be heard in the background. They placed hands on a flag officer with top-secret clearance. This is a major breach of federal security protocols. Who commands that precinct? I have not met the commanding officer. I have encountered only the desk sergeant and the 2 arresting officers, Grant Mercer and Elliot Crane. I am sending Colonel Marcus Vance from the Criminal Investigation Division with federal legal counsel. They will arrive shortly. Understood, Conrad. Whitaker out. Simone ended the call and faced the cell bars. Sergeant Hollis remained in the corridor, looking like a man awaiting execution. Sergeant. Yes, General. I recommend that you contact your precinct captain. He will want to be present for what is about to happen. Captain Everett Sloan was a man who valued control and order. He had managed the Briarwood Division for years through rigid discipline and strict adherence to department protocol. He was at home preparing breakfast when his phone rang. The sound did not come from the normal precinct line. It was the distinctive alert assigned to the chief of police. Sloan answered immediately. Captain, what in God's name is happening inside your precinct? The chief demanded. Sir, I don't understand. I received a call from the mayor, who was contacted by the governor after the Secretary of Defense became involved. Sloan dropped the spoon he was holding. The Secretary of Defense? One of your patrol officers arrested Brigadier General Simone Whitaker. They processed her like a common criminal because she was jogging through her own neighborhood. The chief's voice became a furious roar. Military investigators are mobilizing. The FBI is on its way. The Department of Justice is preparing civil rights charges. Get to your precinct immediately and resolve this before federal agents tear the building apart. The call ended. Sloan did not change out of his civilian clothing. He grabbed his badge, rushed to his vehicle, activated the emergency lights, and drove toward the precinct at reckless speed. Inside the station, the legal foundations of Mercer's charges were already collapsing. He claimed that Simone's clothing and her presence in the neighborhood amounted to suspicious activity, but exercising near her own home provided no reasonable or articulable suspicion for detention. The failure to identify charge was equally baseless. Maryland did not authorize officers to demand identification under those circumstances, and Simone had voluntarily provided both her name and address. The allegation that she had resisted arrest was a complete fabrication intended to excuse excessive force. Video footage would show that she had remained compliant throughout the encounter. Mercer paced through the bullpen, biting his thumbnail. His confidence had begun to break apart, replaced by a sickening terror. "It's fake," he repeated to anyone who would listen. "It's some sophisticated trick. She could be one of those anti-government extremists who hacks federal systems. I did the right thing." No one responded. Soon afterward, 3 black armored Chevrolet Suburbans drove onto the front plaza and stopped directly outside the precinct. 6 people emerged. 4 were heavily built men wearing tactical equipment marked with the bright yellow letters CID. Colonel Marcus Vance led them. His expression looked as though it had been carved from stone. Beside him walked Adrian Cole, a precise and formidable federal attorney representing the Pentagon. The bullpen became silent. Telephones continued ringing, but no one answered. Colonel Vance strode directly to the booking desk and towered over Sergeant Hollis. "I am Colonel Marcus Vance of the United States Army Criminal Investigation Division," he announced. "I am here for Brigadier General Simone Whitaker. Where is she?" Captain Sloan, who had arrived only moments earlier and was still struggling to catch his breath, hurried from the back office. "Colonel, I am Captain Everett Sloan. I am deeply sorry." "Save your apologies for the congressional hearing," Adrian Cole interrupted. He placed a heavy leather briefcase on the counter. "You are illegally holding a senior military official with top-secret security clearance. Given the absence of lawful jurisdiction or probable cause, this may constitute federal kidnapping under Title 18 of the United States Code." Sloan's face turned pale. "Kidnapping? My officers believed—" "I do not care what your officers believed," Vance snarled. "Open that cell immediately." Mercer stepped forward, desperately holding on to what remained of his pride. "Wait a minute. I am the arresting officer. She refused to identify herself, and she was prowling through the neighborhood." Vance turned toward him. His gaze carried the kind of authority that had silenced hardened enemy combatants in war zones. "Are you Officer Grant Mercer?" "Yes, I am." "You are a disgrace to that uniform," Vance said, his voice dropping into a lethal whisper. "You profiled, assaulted, and falsely imprisoned a decorated veteran who has accomplished more for this country before breakfast than you will accomplish in your entire career. Turn around and place your hands behind your back." Mercer stared at him. "What? You can't arrest me. I'm a police officer." "You are a suspected civil rights violator who created a federal security incident," Cole replied. "The Department of Justice has authorized your immediate detention pending charges for deprivation of rights under color of law." 2 CID agents stepped forward and seized Mercer's arms. The irony was impossible to ignore. Earlier that morning, Mercer had aggressively placed handcuffs on an innocent woman. Now federal agents forced his own wrists together behind his back. The sharp clicking of the cuffs echoed through the silent bullpen. Crane watched from his desk, trembling violently. When one of the agents looked toward him, he immediately rose and placed his hands behind his back without being told. "Captain," Hollis said in a hollow voice, "get the keys." A group consisting of Hollis, Sloan, Vance, and Cole moved through the cinder block corridor. Hollis's hands shook so severely that he dropped the keys twice before managing to insert one into the lock. The mechanism turned, and the heavy steel door opened. Simone Whitaker stood in the center of the cell. She did not appear relieved. She did not look traumatized. She looked like a commanding officer inspecting her unit after a battle. "General Whitaker," Colonel Vance said. He delivered a perfect salute. "Ma'am, the area is secure. Your transportation is waiting." Simone returned the salute with flawless precision. "Thank you, Colonel." She stepped from the cell and walked past the sweating Captain Sloan without acknowledging him. As she entered the bullpen, every officer in the room rose from their desk. Some stood from genuine respect. Most stood because they were terrified. Simone stopped beside the booking counter, where Grant Mercer stood in handcuffs. His face had turned pale, and his eyes were wide with the realization that his career and freedom were disappearing before him. She looked directly at him. She did not celebrate. She did not shout. The silence she commanded was more devastating than any insult. "I warned you, Officer Mercer," Simone said quietly, her voice carrying throughout the room. "You were making a catastrophic mistake." She turned and walked through the glass doors into the morning light, leaving the ruins of his career behind her. The silence that remained inside the Briarwood Division precinct was not peaceful. It was the suffocating silence left after an explosion in a confined room, when everyone remained stunned and unable to understand the scale of the destruction. Through the front windows, the remaining officers watched the armored Suburbans pull away from the curb and merge into traffic toward Washington. The federal team had taken the general. They had left the precinct with a nightmare. Captain Sloan stood motionless in the center of the bullpen. He had built his identity around the appearance of complete control. In a matter of moments, that control had been obliterated. "Captain," Sergeant Hollis said from behind the booking desk. His voice cracked with fear. What are we supposed to do?" Sloan never had an opportunity to answer. Federal sirens sounded outside. 4 dark blue Ford Explorers entered the parking lot and positioned themselves around the remaining police vehicles. The doors opened, and a dozen agents wearing Navy windbreakers marked with the yellow letters FBI moved toward the building. Special Agent Dana Holloway led them. A veteran investigator from the Civil Rights Division, Holloway was known for her direct manner and refusal to tolerate excuses. She entered the precinct accompanied by 2 agents carrying empty evidence boxes. Her eyes immediately locked onto Captain Sloan. "Captain Everett Sloan." "Yes," he answered, pulling nervously at the collar of his civilian shirt. Holloway displayed her badge. "Special Agent Dana Holloway, FBI Civil Rights Division. We are taking control of this precinct, pending a federal investigation into potential systemic civil rights violations." Her voice carried no sympathy. "Your network servers will be seized. Your dispatch records will be impounded. Every officer who is on duty during the unlawful arrest of Brigadier General Whitaker is restricted from leaving until they have been questioned." "Agent Holloway, please," Sloan said, lifting his hands. "This was the work of one rogue officer. Mercer is already in federal custody. The rest of the department knew nothing about it." "The Department of Justice does not accept the lone wolf explanation when evidence suggests a culture of impunity," Holloway replied sharply. "All federal funding to this precinct is being frozen. We are also reviewing every item your department acquired through the military surplus program." She pointed toward one of the agents. "I want access to Mercer's locker, his patrol cruiser, and all body camera footage from the previous 12 months. While federal agents dismantled the operations of the Briarwood precinct, Grant Mercer entered a frightening new reality. He was placed in a sterile interrogation room at the FBI field office in Baltimore. His handcuffs had been removed, but the door was locked from the outside. The room had no windows, only a 2-way mirror and a camera mounted near the ceiling. Mercer sat at the metal table. His hands shook so badly that he concealed them beneath it. The door opened. Adrian Cole entered with Special Agent Holloway. Neither of them sat down. They stood over Mercer, forcing him to look upward. "Officer Mercer," Cole began, his voice smooth but filled with restrained contempt. "Do you understand the seriousness of the federal laws you violated?" "I made a mistake," Mercer blurted. His voice had become a weak, desperate whine, nothing like the arrogant tone he had used on the street. It was dark. She looked suspicious. "I was only doing my job. I was protecting the neighborhood." "Protecting it from what?" Holloway asked. She dropped a thick folder onto the table. It landed with a heavy thud. "Black women who own property worth more than you will earn in several lifetimes." "That isn't what this was about," Mercer protested. "We seized your personal phone," Holloway said. She opened the folder and slid a printed page of messages across the table. You believed you were being clever by using an encrypted application to communicate with Victor Langley, vice president of the Hawthorne Crest Homeowners Association. The blood drained from Mercer's face. Holloway leaned forward and placed one finger beside a highlighted message. Mr. Langley wrote to you shortly before the encounter. That new woman at 718 is running through the neighborhood again. Her presence lowers the property values. Frighten her, Grant. Make sure she understands this is not her kind of community. Cole crossed his arms. And you replied, "Understood, Victor. I'll make sure the message is clear. I might even give her a complimentary ride to the station." The interrogation room became silent. The low hum of the ventilation system seemed deafening. "This was not a mistake," Holloway said softly. Her quiet voice was more terrifying than a shout. This was a planned conspiracy to deprive an American citizen of her constitutional rights because of her race while acting under color of law. That is a direct violation of federal civil rights statutes. You conspired with a private citizen to carry out a campaign of racial intimidation against a decorated flag officer of the United States Armed Forces, Cole added. General Whitaker oversees strategic logistical operations around the world and possesses top-secret clearance. You decided to assault and imprison her as a favor to a racist homeowners association official. "I can explain," Mercer said. Tears began spilling from his eyes. "Langley promised to recommend me for a private security contract. I didn't know she was a general. I swear I didn't know." "It would not matter if she worked as a cashier at a neighborhood grocery store," Holloway snapped. "The law is supposed to protect everyone equally." She leaned closer. "But because she is a general, you have brought the full attention of the federal government onto yourself in a way you cannot begin to understand." Holloway tapped the folder. "Your rookie partner has already cooperated. He is describing every civil rights violation he witnessed during his first months under your supervision. In exchange for consideration, he is prepared to testify against you." Mercer collapsed forward and buried his face in his hands. A hollow sob escaped him. His career was over. His freedom was disappearing. The life he had known had effectively ended. Meanwhile, inside the secure corridors of the Pentagon, Brigadier General Simone Whitaker was not crying. She was working. The medical team had examined her. The bruises around her wrists had been photographed and documented for the Department of Justice. She had immediately changed into a fresh, perfectly tailored Class A uniform. The stars on her shoulders gleamed beneath the corridor lights. Simone entered Lieutenant General Conrad Bell's secure briefing room. He waited behind a heavy wooden desk, a deep scowl carved into his weathered face. "Simone," Bell said as he stood, "I reviewed the initial Justice Department report. The situation is worse than we believed. You were deliberately targeted because of your race." "I read the report," Simone replied calmly as she took a seat. "It is disturbing, but not entirely surprising. Unchecked authority often produces this kind of institutional corruption." "The Attorney General is personally supervising the prosecution," Bell said. "Mercer could spend more than a decade in federal prison. Victor Langley has already been arrested by the FBI, and the precinct captain is being forced to resign." Simone nodded. "That addresses the immediate offenders. It does not address the system that empowered them." "What are you proposing?" "The Briarwood Division is heavily militarized," Simone said, leaning forward. Her gaze became sharp and analytical. "While I was inside the precinct, I observed its tactical resources. The department possesses surplus M4 carbines, military-grade body armor, and 2 mine-resistant armored vehicles acquired through the federal surplus program." Bell frowned. "Many local departments possess similar equipment. A department that permits officers to hunt minority residents as a favor to a homeowners association does not need weapons designed for war," Simone stated. "They lack the discipline, oversight, and moral judgment necessary to control that equipment." She held Bell's gaze. "If they treat a woman jogging through her own neighborhood as an enemy combatant, imagine what they might do with an armored vehicle during a peaceful demonstration." Bell rubbed his chin. "You want to remove their equipment." "I want to strip the department to its foundation," Simone corrected. "I am submitting a formal recommendation to the Defense Logistics Agency demanding the immediate recovery of every piece of military-grade surplus equipment assigned to the Briarwood Division." She continued before Bell could respond. "I also want a nationwide audit of the surplus program. Local police departments cannot demand the equipment of soldiers without accepting the discipline and accountability expected of soldiers. If they cannot meet that standard, they lose the equipment." Bell studied the formidable woman seated across from him. A faint smile appeared on his face. Mercer had not merely arrested a general. He had arrested a master strategist who understood exactly how to dismantle the system that had given him power. "Prepare the order, General Whitaker," Bell said. "You have my complete authorization." Months later, summer heat covered the pavement outside the United States District Court for the District of Maryland. The intense media attention surrounding the Whitaker case had reached its final stage. Inside the cold, heavily air-conditioned courtroom, the atmosphere was suffocating. Judge Malcolm Avery, known for imposing severe sentences in civil rights cases, looked down from the bench. Grant Mercer sat at the defense table. He appeared to have aged a decade. Without his badge, uniform, and arrogant confidence, he looked small. He wore an ill-fitting gray suit, his shoulders slumped, and his eyes fixed on the polished table. Adrian Cole sat at the prosecution table beside a team of Department of Justice attorneys. In the gallery, Brigadier General Simone Whitaker sat perfectly upright in her dress uniform. She had declined to deliver a victim impact statement. She did not consider herself a victim. She considered herself the catalyst for necessary justice. "Mr. Mercer," Judge Avery said. His voice silenced the murmurs throughout the courtroom. "Stand." Mercer rose on trembling legs. His attorney placed a hand on his arm, but the gesture brought him no comfort. "Grant Mercer, a federal jury has found you guilty of deprivation of rights under color of law and conspiracy against rights," the judge began. He looked over the top of his glasses. "During my many years on the bench, I have rarely encountered such a cowardly and deliberate abuse of authority." Mercer stared downward. "You were entrusted with a badge and firearm to protect the people in your community. Instead, you transformed that authority into a weapon and acted as a prejudiced mercenary in a private neighborhood dispute." Judge Avery's voice grew harder. "You deliberately targeted a decorated military veteran because you believed the color of her skin meant she did not belong in a neighborhood where she had lawfully and honorably earned her place." Mercer closed his eyes. A tear moved down his cheek. "Your conduct destroyed your own future and cast a shameful shadow over the thousands of honorable officers who carry out their duties with integrity," the judge continued. "Because of your actions, the Briarwood Division is now operating under a federal consent decree. It has lost federal funding and has been stripped of its tactical equipment." He adjusted the papers before him. "You have disgraced your department, your community, and yourself." The courtroom remained completely still. "It is the judgment of this court that you, Grant Mercer, be committed to the custody of the Federal Bureau of Prisons for a term of 144 months, 12 years, without the possibility of early parole." A collective gasp moved through the gallery. Mercer's knees gave way. His attorney caught him before he struck the floor. 12 years inside a federal prison as a former police officer awaited him. "Furthermore," Judge Avery said, raising the gavel, "your law enforcement certification is permanently revoked nationwide, and your municipal pension is forfeited." The gavel struck the block. "Court is adjourned." The courtroom doors opened. Federal marshals approached and seized Mercer's arms. As they turned him toward the exit, his eyes briefly met Simone's. She did not smile. She did not mock him. She simply gave him a cold, final nod of acknowledgement. The battle was over. She had won. Soon afterward, autumn returned to Crestwood Hills. The oak trees shifted into shades of amber and gold, while morning mist settled over the perfectly maintained lawns. Before sunrise, Brigadier General Simone Whitaker stepped through the front door of 718 Hawthorne Crest. She wore the same faded West Point sweatshirt, black running tights, and fleece beanie. She stretched on the porch and adjusted the phone secured inside her armband. Then she stepped onto the sidewalk and began to run. Her steady footsteps broke the silence. As she turned onto the main road, headlights appeared through the mist. A newly marked Briarwood Division police cruiser approached. It did not crawl toward her threateningly. It moved at the steady pace of a normal neighborhood patrol. Simone maintained her stride. Her heart rate remained controlled, and her breathing stayed even. She did not look away. But she did not prepare herself for a confrontation either. As the cruiser passed, the officer behind the wheel, a young woman recently transferred into the reform department, lowered her window. She did not activate a spotlight. She did not sound the siren. She looked at Simone, offered a respectful nod, and raised one hand in greeting. "Good morning, General," she called over the quiet hum of the engine. "Good morning, officer," Simone replied in a calm, powerful voice. The cruiser continued down the street, turned at the end of the block, and disappeared into the approaching dawn. Simone kept running. Her stride remained long and unbroken as the sun finally rose over the horizon and the weight of justice rested comfortably across her shoulders. The frightening truth is that an encounter like this could happen to anyone. General Simone Whitaker's experience proves that dangerous prejudice and unchecked authority can hide behind a badge. Sometimes, only a devastating collision with the truth can force an entire system to change. She did not fight back with violence. She fought with discipline, intelligence, and the undeniable power of the law. And from within the system itself, she dismantled the corruption that had tried to silence her. If this powerful story of justice, resilience, and accountability moved you, please press the like button, share the video with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more unforgettable real-life drama stories.